Okay, so we are going to be going over lesson 3.6. Lesson 3.6 is going to be all about the quadratic formula. So we're going to be taking quadratic equations in that form ax squared plus bx plus c, and we are going to be putting them into, we will use this quadratic formula to solve for our answers for x. So just like completing the square, the whole purpose of doing this is that it is going to allow you to solve those quadratics that are unfactorable. Okay? Then after we do that, we're going to talk about the discriminant. And the discriminant is something that we will use that's part of the quadratic formula, and we use that to describe the solutions. So what is the quadratic formula? Well, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Now, a lot of things up there, a lot of a, b's, and c's. What are those a, b, and c's? Well, remember your standard form is y equals a x squared plus b x plus c. Okay? So basically what you're going to do is just like all of our others, we're going to get it into that standard form. And then whatever number is in front of my x squared will get plugged in for those a's there. Whatever number is in front of my x, that's my b, it'll get plugged in for your b values there. And then whatever number is your c gets plugged in for your c value there. Okay? And then from there, you just work down through and simplify it. Now, not super difficult. The hard part is remembering this. When I was in high school, my teacher played us the Notre Dame fight song, and we sang this over and over again to the tune of the Notre Dame fight song, which is what I am going to do for you as well. So, have your singing voices ready when we show up for class on Tuesday, because we are going to be ready to perform. I'm going to do this a cappella because I am that talented. There is another video in there that I went and videoed. Had a lot of senior girls in Miss Gundy's class, so they sang it for you so you guys can kind of hear it to the tune of the music. But my a cappella version is about to begin. And a 1, and a 2, and a 3. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Bet you didn't know I was that talented. So go and watch the video. Like I said, the video, it'll play it with the tune of the song. You can hear everything. We will have this song on repeat next class so that you guys can hear how it's supposed to sound. But this thing is super handy because it's going to allow you to have this song memorized, and you won't ever forget it. It's impossible. This page here has the link to where the video was on YouTube. If you guys want to try that link, you can. It might be gone because I tried to find it and I couldn't find it. But anyway, let's go ahead and practice then. Quadratic formula practice. I have 3x squared plus 2x equals 5x. Now, before I'm ready to solve this, I have to make sure it equals 0, just like every other problem. So I'm going to subtract 5x to both sides. And when I do that, I have a 3x squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. Okay? Getting ready to do these then, we need to determine what is your a value, what is your b value, what is your c value. Okay? So a value, my a, is the number in front of the x squared. So my a will be a 3. B value is the number in front of the x. So my b is going to be a negative 5. My c value is my constant term. So c is 2. So I'm going to recall my quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. I know, you're still impressed. And I'm just going to plug in those values. So I have a negative b, so I'm going to have a negative, and then my b value was a negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So that would be a negative 5 squared minus 4 times my a, which is 3, times my c, which is 2. And all that's underneath the square root there. And that is all divided by 2 times my a, which we said my a was a 3. Okay? Now, when you guys do this, there's really going to be two areas that you need to, or sorry, not two, three areas that you guys need to simplify. Okay, and those three areas are out in front of your plus or minus sign. And really, it's just going to be, are there two negatives there that you need to cancel? The big one we have to simplify, whoops, don't know how I did that. The big one that we have to simplify is the part underneath here. And then the other one we have to simplify, and again, it's not that big, is the part that's at the bottom. So that's essentially what you guys have to simplify. Out in front of the plus or minus, underneath the square root, and then at the bottom of the fraction. Okay? So, out in front, two negatives. What are those two negatives going to do? Gosh dang it. What are those two negatives going to do? Well, they're going to make a plus sign. So all I have out in front is a positive 5. Okay? Plus or minus. Now, underneath the square root, I have a negative 5 squared. So negative 5 times negative 5 is going to give me a 25. And then I've got minus, and again, that's all underneath our square root, minus 4 times 3, which would be 12. 12 times 2 is 24. So I've got a 25 minus 24, all over 2 times 3, and 2 times 3 is 6. Okay? So I've got 5 plus or minus square root of 25 minus 24 all over 6. Okay? What is 25 minus 24? Well, that would be, move that up here. I'm going to have a 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 6. And then our square root of 1, well, the square root of 1 is just 1, so I have a 5 plus or minus 1 over 6. Now remember, plus or minus literally means you're going to add or you're going to subtract. So set up your two equations at that point. 5 plus 1 over 6, which is 6 over 6, which is 1. One of my answers for this is going to be 1. I also have 5 minus 1 over 6, which would be 4 over 6, and 4 over 6 reduces to 2/3. Okay? So 1 and 2/3 would be my answer that I get for my quadratic formula. Okay? So, hard to remember the formula. Then you have to be able to plug it in. But just remember, when you guys plug it in, there's two spots you're going to try to simplify at. Okay? One of the spots is here out in front. Your other spot is underneath the square root there. And then you also have to simplify down here. Okay? Simplify those three spots. Shouldn't be too bad. Next one then. Oh, that did not erase. Next one, we have x squared plus 11x plus 17. Now remember, I told you guys when we do these, they're not always going to simplify out very easy. Okay? So in this case here, we already have that this equals 1, right? So I'm going to have then, it's already equals 0. It already equals 0, so it's set up. So what is my a value? What's a 1? There's a 1 in front of my x squared. What is my b value? B value would be 11. And my c value is 17. So I'm going to remember my quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus, forgot my equal sign, sorry, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 11 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, times c, which is 17, okay, all divided by 2 times a, which is 1 again, okay. Now remember when I'm doing this, I'm going to simplify out in front. So negative, parentheses 11, there's not two negatives, so it's just a negative 11, plus or minus. I have the square root of. Now I'm going to simplify on the inside of that. That's where it gets a little tricky. So 11 squared, that's 121. You plug that in your calculator. Negative 4 times 1 gives me negative 4, times 17 gives me a negative 68. Okay, 4 and 7 is 28, 4 and 10 is 40. Yep, so negative 68. All divided by 2 times 1, which would be 2. Okay, so nothing too crazy so far. I'm still needing to simplify underneath the square root. 121 minus 68, I get negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 53 over 2. Now, do you know what the square root of 53 is? No, and that's okay. You're just not going to be able to do anything with that. Okay? We have simplified this as far as we can. You cannot find the square root of 53. So, it's just going to stay just like this. Except, we have two answers. One of our answers is going to be negative 11 plus the square root of 53 over 2. The other answer is going to be negative 11 minus the square root of 53 over 2. Okay? Now, a lot of times when we're doing these, we do some graphing. So let's say that you needed to graph that. Well, that's our exact answer. If we needed to graph that, we could plug that into our calculator. Okay, I would need to figure out what is the square root of 53. So I plug in my calculator, square root of 53, and that gives me 7.28. Okay, so this, I've got 7.28 for the square root of 53. So negative 11 plus 7.28, and then divide it by 2. And this is approximately, negative 1.86. Okay? So I could still find an approximate answer for that, but I would prefer you guys to have the exact answer, which is that one there. Okay? Then we'll do one more practice. This one is x squared minus 16x minus 64. Okay? So again, identify what is our a. That'd be that one in front. What is our b? My negative 16. What is our c? My negative 64. So x equals negative b. So negative, and then I've got a negative 16 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 16 squared minus 4ac. So my a is a 1, and my c is a negative 64. Okay, and then all divided by 2a. So 2 times 1. I just realized I used the wrong color for my negative 64. Sorry. That should be green. Negative 64. Okay, all right. Now, we're going to go through here then. 2 negatives makes it a positive 16. Okay, plus or minus the square root of. I've got a negative 16 squared. So negative 16 squared would be 16 times 16. Gives me 256. And then I've got a negative 4 times another negative 4 there, which gives me a positive 256. Okay. All divided by 2. 256 plus 256 gives me 512, so 16 plus or minus square root of 512, all divided by 2. Now, can I find the square root of 512? I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to do my calculator. I cannot. Oh, okay, hold on. I just realized I did a mistake here. Make that a plus 64. Okay, my bad. I was trying to show you guys something here. Make that a plus 64. So if that's a plus 64, that's a positive. Okay, the only thing that's going to change is here in the middle. Okay, so now I've got negative 4 times positive 1 times a positive 64. That makes that a minus there. Okay, so on the inside, I've got 256 minus 256. Sorry about that. Well, what is 256 minus 256? Well, that's a 0. I've got a 0 there. So I end up with 16 plus or minus, what's the square root of 0? Well, that is 0. Okay, so when I set up my two equations here, do I really need two equations? I've got 16 plus 0 divided by 2 and 16 minus 0 divided by 2. Both of those give me 16 over 2, which is 8. Okay? That is okay. You guys are going to end up having the same answer twice. And you guys will see when we do discriminants that that does happen sometimes. And that is perfectly okay if it does. Okay? What this is here, this equation right here, this thing would factor to an x plus 8 squared. Or sorry, an x minus 8 squared. Okay? So it is still a quadratic, but it has the same answer twice. And that's where that shows up from. Next video will be about your discriminants.